Well, I don't know what you call it. Yeah, they say I like to talk. Representative Meeks, do you mind starting us out with a word of prayer?
Absolutely. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day, the opportunity to come together to continue to work out issues facing many Georgians across our state, dear God. We just pray that what we do will be pleasing unto you and that your will be done. Be with our families that are traveling here to be with us, dear Heavenly Father. Be with those families that may still be at home awaiting loved ones to return. Just guide our conversation, dear Heavenly Father, and bless us, guide us, and direct us in all things we ask in your name. Amen.
All righty. Leader Gooch, I believe you wanted to share some remarks.
Make some comments first.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. I'm glad to be here where we're at now with this conference committee. I come here in good faith to try to work out our differences between the two bodies and to try to do something to help the people that made me who I am and the folks that I represent back home and the hardworking farmers and foresters of our state. And I hope we can do that today, and I hope we can get something that everyone can agree on and hopefully get it passed to help the people of our state. And so we shall see. Leader Gooch, go ahead.
Number 7. Thank you, Chairman Goodman and Chairman Jaspers and Chairman Meeks and Whip Burchett and Chairman Dolezal. We have had a full, long session. This is day 40. We've got a lot of work to do before we all leave here tonight, and this piece of legislation has been in this building for more than 1 year. I think it's been around 4 years or so. I think I see nodding heads out in the audience. It's an important piece of legislation for industry. Obviously, our ag industry is our #1 industry in our state. We want to continue to promote it, protect it, but we also have responsibilities as a state to protect the citizens and protect the investments that we have made in our infrastructure. We have spent billions of dollars over the years. In the 12 years that I've been in the Senate, we went from practically not being able to make bond payments, not being able to pay our employees, and basically not building any new roads because of inadequate funding. In 2015, we did what we thought was the right decision. We increased the gas tax and the diesel tax in Georgia, which increased over $1 billion a year of additional revenues, and we have seen significant improvements in that infrastructure as a result of that investment. The $1 billion a year that we increased in 2016 as a result of passing House Bill 170 was the bare minimum that we were told by the experts that we needed to just maintain what we had. And we were told day after day after day we could not improve our infrastructure without additional funding. We were able to get $1 billion, and we knew that was not going to be sufficient. The last 4 years we've spent time, Chairman Jaspers, Chairman Ginn, Chairman Dolezal, myself, Chairman Beach, and others, Chairman Tanner. We've had study committees on freight and logistics. We have a tremendous state to do business. We hear it all the time. We're the #1 state to do business. We have the fastest growing port in the nation, or on the eastern seaboard at least. We have the #1 airport, the busiest airport in the world. We have all the right ingredients, the best climate, but we have a infrastructure that is not adequate to continue to support the kind of growth that we have experienced and what we expect to experience in the future without investing billions and billions of dollars more to not only maintain but to enhance that infrastructure. And so this decision tonight has to be bigger than just about allowing additional weights on farm trucks, ag trucks, or timber trucks. It's got to be more than adding 4,000 pounds per load. This discussion has to go from tonight forward through the next 6 to 8 months, talking to the people that are in this room and the people that are listening to us online to say the Georgia businesses have to be a part of the solution. We need every one of you to be back in this room the next time these two transportation chairmen calls a meeting for this discussion, because we've got to find additional funding to fix the problems that we know or that are coming. We have to invest in this infrastructure. So whatever we do tonight, It's not the end of the conversation, it's the beginning of the conversation. If a bill passes here tonight, we can't say, all right, we're finished, y'all go and you'll have your way, or you won't have your way. But instead, we're going to be back in this room in the next few weeks talking about it even more. We need additional funding. No, I don't know where that additional funding would come from. We've spent a lot of money over at the DOT looking at it with consultants. We have studies. We have a freight and logistics plan that has just been completed that indicates how much that money is, and it's in the billions of dollars with a B. And so, Mr. Chairman, I want us to make sure we keep the big picture in mind as we go through this conversation tonight. This bill that the Senate passed gave us a 1-year extension on the truck weights that were increased from 84,000 pounds to 88,000 pounds, and we narrowed it down to ag industry and timber industry trucks only. We put a carve out to where those extra weights would not apply in the non-attainment counties in Atlanta. There's about 13 counties that would apply to. We increased the fines for bad actors. If you're pulled over by a motor carrier, you would be weighed and you would be fined accordingly. We also put language in our bill that came out of the Senate that allowed local law enforcement to do the enforcement as well. And I know people in this room have heartburn with that. And so we need to have that discussion as well. We believe that if you're going to be able to carry the extra weights, you should be in compliance with the letter of the law. And that's important for two big reasons. One is public safety, and two, it's going to help us to be sure that the bad actors do not continue to degrade the infrastructure of our back roads, especially county roads that are built to substandard performance. And we know our interstate routes are built to good quality standards, but for whatever reason, the federal highway will not allow you to go over 80,000 pounds. And so what we're asking in this legislation is allowing is for us to increase our weights, not on the interstates, but on other roads other than interstates, to include secondary county and city streets. So what we have to do is be very careful in how far this bill carries us into the future. 1 year, in my opinion, is adequate. 88,000 pounds is a 5% increase over what we had. So I think it was a safe approach. It was a carefully crafted bill that Chairman Dolezal and I worked on together, and it came out of the Senate with 44 votes for it and a few votes against it. If we make drastic changes to this conference committee report tonight, we may lose the bill. I just want everybody to be prepared for what could happen. So thank you for letting me share a few words, and maybe others will want to share some words, and maybe we can talk and ask questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt that we're going to have needs in the future. Leader Gooch, I just, from my personal point of perspective, maybe it's just because I'm a South Georgia farmer, holding our farmers hostage to get it is something that doesn't sit very well with me and the folks that I represent. But I would like to, who would like to go next? Representative Meeks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and leaders, Mr. Leader and Mr. Chairman, and Whip Burchett and Chairman Jaspers. Certainly appreciate the many, many hours of debate and conversation that has taken place with House Bill 189. Many of you probably know that House Bill 189 that finally passed the House was actually the third version of the bill that passed. One that we took from as introduced. We kept making changes to it, trying to make it better, trying to work with industry to make sure that we were addressing the issues. To the leader's point, not all of rural Georgia has an interstate that runs through it. As we look at the competitiveness of agriculture and forestry, margins are thin. As we put input cost onto those loads, that's not something that we pass along to the end user. We absorb that cost as a cost of doing business in a time when input cost and margins are extremely thin. I think that's one of the things we have to look at. We look at we look at tax credits and other things that we do for businesses, and I sit around and I think about this, and I'm like, okay, if a business really doesn't like what we're doing, they have the opportunity to pick up and relocate somewhere else. That's not the case with the land people. That's not the case with the farmland. We can't pick up and move to another state if we are trying to be competitive in an area in which we can do something. We've run under an executive order now for 3 years at 95,000. I know last year the whip had a bill that came out, I believe, at 95,000. I mean, there was conversation about going to 100. I felt like we started at 90, we backed it up to 88, felt like we had a good compromise in the House and a bill that could be workable for the industry, for the economy, for the end users, for the customers. And I agree, it is a big picture. But I think we have to remember as we move forward that, you know, I think the industry is happy to be at the table and help come with ideas, but when we look at the bottom lines of where we are and producers are, as opposed to one that can be passed on to the end consumer, I think that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind. I know a lot of hours have been spent on this bill, both those that support it and those who oppose it. I certainly appreciate everyone working with me and trying to get us to a workable solution as we move forward on day 40 here of Sine Die. So thank you for all of the efforts and hopes that we can come to a resolution that's positive for the industry. Thank you.
Chairman Jasper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick, I know we've got lots to do. You know, I thank you for the openness that we have in this discussion. I think everyone that's been involved in this has been very open in the committees. You know, we had a nearly 5.5-hour meeting the first time we heard it this year in January. You know, to let in the public had, 90 questions by members to see how we drilled down into Representative Meeks's deal. You know, and I appreciate this. It's a great discussion and the openness of it. You know, Senator Gooch, I agree with you absolutely that as you and I have worked together for the last 3 years on infrastructure needs, that's the overhanging cloud over all this. You know, I put forth a House bill this year to kind of look at, just House Bill 617, to look at a plan to spend money. How would we go about taking infrastructure needs that we do and how we apply money toward it if we can determine what we do, and I hope we continue to look at that next year. You know, the only thing I just want to throw out in a couple of things is, you know, local law enforcement enforcing these laws. I think, you know, the Motor Carrier Division is a very professional, well-trained, precise group of people. We got to know them in the 2 committee meetings we had in the House, and I certainly want to keep them at the forefront of making sure that we do stop bad actors. And we all recognize there are bad actors out there, and that group can do a good job doing that, and will do it right. But you're right, infrastructure needs are huge, but and I think but the side of the local agricultural needs are great in this area too. I look forward to finding a solution.
Thank you. Chairman Dolezal, you care to say anything? Representative Burchett, what number are you, 9? 9. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just excited to be on my first conference committee. I don't even know what to do with my hands. What are we doing here? I totally
Did you shave for this?
I shaved just for this conference committee, just so every one of you all know. So that should earn me some credit here. I think the Senate did some good work in improving the bill of the House. I just think there's a few provisions in here that if we tweak a little bit, we can get to a workable solution that both benefits the opportunity for the industries to continue to grow, while also understanding that these folks are using these roads and that they should be cognizant of the necessity of the state to be able to keep these roads in a state or in a place that keeps our roads in the state that they are now, right? So we want good roads in the state of Georgia. I think that a 1 year is not a long enough time to figure this out. I get that we have some budgetary needs coming up fairly quickly, but frankly, I don't know anywhere else that we've sort of said, hey, you guys need to be here at the table to make sure that we can tax you appropriately. I think that anytime taxes are talked about in this building, everybody's going to come to the table because they don't want to give their pound of flesh, right? So they're going to be in here advocating on their behalf. And I don't think we should pick out just a couple industries here. I do get the the point of it to make sure that they are sitting here, but the folks that I'm dealing with that are advocates for raising the weight, they're here every year. They're working on their issues every year. You think you get their issues handled this year, and they come up with new issues next year. That's the way it happens. I don't think they're going anywhere. I think that like I said, you guys did some good work. You're thinking in a different manner than we are in the House. That's why our process is perfect. I'm just asking that we come to some terms here that the industry can live with and the Senate can live with, and let's get a bill passed. There's been too many hours under this gold dome dealing with this issue. I think we've reverted back to a weight that is a reasonable ask, 88,000 pounds. You consider the other initiatives we have in this state here. We're advocating and running down a road so fast that sometimes I can't figure out where we are with these electric vehicles. And nobody's thinking about a Tesla being 2.5 times the weight of a Camry, or thinking about a commercial truck that's going to be 15,000 pounds heavier, empty. If it's going to be a battery-operated truck, those conversations need to be had if we're going to be walking down this electric vehicle road. So I'm just asking that we look at some of these provisions here to sunset this radius, 175 miles. I mean, currently, correct me if I'm wrong, if you don't even have to have a CDL if you're a farmer, and you can drive 150 miles from the farm. I'd like to see us at least match that code section that allows 150 miles. And I'll be honest with you, I think that most of the folks that are in these industries, they'll tell you they don't haul much further than. They certainly don't haul more than 150 miles. They haul, try to stay around 100 miles. I think that's probably the spot where it's not economical anymore to haul wood or haul farm products. Those two provisions, and then this local enforcement thing. I'd like to have a conversation about the local enforcement thing. The conversation that I've had with my folks back home, they can't even get deputies enough to respond to domestic violence calls or run radar on a road. And I don't think that it's practical to say that our local sheriffs are going to or PDs are going to go out and buy scales and get the training and put them on the roads ready to enforce this law. I think that, it's a laudable approach, but we need to be a little more measured in that approach, because everybody is telling me that they're having a hard enough time getting folks hired for these positions to do just, public safety from a burglary, firearms, kidnapping, just doing the regular run-of-the-mill law enforcement. We're going to add to these local guys. I think that's a provision that I would like to discuss here. And I don't know how this goes, Gooch, and I know you've been on these things multiple times, so you tell me when to slow down or when to stop, and I will. Those, I just like to talk about those, see if we can come to some terms that we could get the industry to live with, and you guys can live with, so that you feel we have got enough hook into them to get them back here to sit at the table and talk about how we're going to fund these our roads and our bridges. That's all I got, Mr. Chairman.
Number 7. Thank you, Whip Burchett. Let me, since you've identified 3 areas of concern, which is basically the gist of the bill now, the local law enforcement piece. Let's talk a little bit about that and drill down some. As you know, in this bill, it's not a mandate that the locals enforce it. It's totally optional. Each county would make that decision, or each jurisdiction, whether it's a city PD or a county sheriff's department or whomever. It's always subject to appropriations by the governing authority, whether that's city council or county commissioners. And there would have to be certification training requirements met, just like we do with motor carrier division in the state. But why would you be opposed to a county that wishes to invest in the equipment, whether that's $5,000 for portable scales or $10,000 for training, whatever the number is? If the county is willing to invest in that and allow that police department or that sheriff's department to go out into those communities to protect their citizens for public safety. Now, we're not just talking about weight that would tear the roads up, but we're talking about public safety as well, especially in back roads. A lot of these county subsurface treatment roads are very thin, but they're also very narrow, very little drainage. I've been all over South Georgia with Chairman Goodman. I live in North Georgia. I grew up on a farm. I understand it. I was a county commissioner. I understand how some of these roads are built. They start out with dirt, and in North Georgia, we use granite for base, and then we put a little chip seal down, which is tar and gravel. A few years later, we get a little bit more money. We put a couple inches of binder or E-mix, and then come back, top it with F-mix or whatever topping you want to put to make it slick and pretty. But 2 or 3 years later, it starts to crumble, depending on the thickness of the asphalt and the base. If the base isn't prepared correctly, the roads are going to come all to pieces. They're not going to last. We have to let the county commissioners protect their investments. I don't think motor carrier has enough resources to take care of the interstates and the state routes that we have today. I think they do a great job. Someone's bragging on them earlier. We need to invest in their resources as well to protect our citizens, protect our roads. So why would we be opposed to allowing counties and cities to do that on their own? And I get it. The sheriffs may not politically want to do this, but at some point they have an obligation to enforce the laws on the books. They do it today on other things. They run radar. They catch speeders. I've been pulled over for speeding, and I violated the law. I paid the ticket. Same thing should happen with any of us if we're doing something wrong. I don't think anybody at this table is going to disagree with that. So why would we not let the locals enforce the laws that are being broken? And if that number that's in here is wrong, let's find what that number should be, whether that 20 cents is too high or too low or what have you. So let's have that discussion. But I'd love to hear some feedback from you on why we shouldn't let local law enforcement have that authority.
Well, I agree. 9. Yeah, 9. Well, I think I understand your argument. The question is why do we not want to let them? I don't think they want to. I don't think they want to be weighing trucks, and so that's where I'm that's the position I'm starting. I don't think they want to be weighing trucks. I don't think your PD or your sheriffs want to be weighing trucks, but that's pretty much the basis of my argument. I do understand your argument about the roads at a county level. I know. There's only so much money to go around in rural Georgia, or just pick any county. And so many times the county commission is the commission over roads and bridges. Right. Roads and ditches is how we say in South Georgia. So
we got plenty of ditches.
What they do is they get $600,000. Maybe they could get a GDOT spec, quarter mile out of that, but Commissioner A wants a mile in his district, Commissioner B wants a mile in his district, and so on down the road. So they take that $600 and they just put binder down on a road and they go 12 miles with it or whatever it is. I think that's also a basis for the problems that we're having. We're building roads to a substandard spec, and But I have to, I have to address the fact that we've been running 95,000 pounds for 3 years. And before that, when we had a fire in 13, we ran it for, I don't know, at least 18 months, maybe longer than that. And before that, in 2007, we ran at 95,000 pounds for however many months. I mean, this is not unprecedented. We're asking for 88,000 pounds, puts us in line with these other states. And I know that the feds don't let 88,000 pounds ride on there, but if you get a permit out of Savannah, you can haul 100,000 pounds. And I know that's 1% of the trucks that have got that permit, but I don't know how many trips they're making, but there's a god-awful lot of containers coming out of that port at 100,000 pounds, and they're riding on that interstate, they're riding on that state road, and they're riding on that county road because they can only go from pickup to delivery. And I would submit to you that there's not a truck anywhere in the state of Georgia in this nation that is doing anything but picking up and delivering. So you got 100,000 pounds running out of the port with 6,000 trucks with the permit for however many trips a year running from the port to, there's no interstate that runs from the port to Stewart Candy Company in Waycross, Georgia. So this is not unprecedented. We do have that we're operating at these higher weights. We have operated these higher weights. I'd just like to say that if the locals are asking for these things, I mean, maybe we give it to them. But how many calls do you get, Senator Gooch, about a speed trap somewhere and getting the speed trap, and the next thing you're going to be getting is like so and so's set up on the corner or they're weighing trucks. I don't think that is conducive to this environment, but I mean that's just my opinion, particularly if they're not asking to do it. Now, the fine structure, I want to assure that we get the bad actors. I like the bridge fine and the weight fine. Let's just pick. Can we pick 2 out of 3? Maybe do away with the axle fine and go with whichever one's whichever one's going to be the most severe. I'll go with that. But the structure, and I'm just reading it. I'm a little bit confused, and the chairman probably be able to clear it up for me. Can we just have 2 fines? And I definitely want to get the bad actors. If they're hauling above the weight, let's get them. I've heard conversations about some sort of technology you can put on bridges that weighs them when they cross, and if they're heavy, fine them. I think everybody in this room will say that you got bad actors. We need to address the bad actors, but the whole industry shouldn't suffer for these bad actors.
Okay, go ahead. Representative Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the local law enforcement, Mr. Leader, I think we have to reflect on where these roads and bridges are. And as we've heard from testimony, that overweight trucks may seem to turn over. If in the area where I live, if a log truck is stopped to be weighed, there's nowhere for that log truck to pull over except for on the shoulder of the road. And when that happens, it is my sense that if we've had a rainy season and it is slick, we're going to have a truck out there rolling that truck back over and picking the wood up, simply because there's nowhere for that truck to stop except on the road to have the scales pulled out, if that's what the local law enforcement or local law jurisdiction is doing in order to do that and do it safely. I may be coming from the opposite direction with a tractor that takes up the whole road, and then that makes us have a whole other predicament of trying to get around, with nowhere for them to stop safely to be weighed.
And
How does MCD do it?
From the ones that I have seen they're usually on a 4-lane road. They'll usually pull into a turning lane, particularly on Highway 84. They'll pull into a turning lane that's in the middle, or either it's where they always are when I see them anyway. I very rarely see them on a 2-lane road. unless there's a designated spot where they can get off the road.
Yeah, yeah. Can I say something real quick? Well, I understand, but I want to be fair to everybody. For everybody in the audience, I just want to make you understand what it means to everyday Georgians who are out there trying to make a living. Because I've reached out to people in my district, loggers, farmers, and so we're up here and we're trying to implement public policy. But for a small family logging business that's going to move about 60 loads a week, they're going to turn about $1.7 million in gross revenue. That's gross revenue. That's total money coming into that business. The difference on an average 50-mile haul for that small family business between 84 and 88,000 pounds is $154,000 a year on a business that doesn't turn but $1.7 million in gross revenue. Now keep in mind that every state that touches us in terms of ag and forestry, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, they're either 4,000 to 6,000 pounds more than we are. So when you look at in terms of competitiveness and cost and everything else, the policy that we have at 84,000 pounds is a true cost. And $154,000 in a small business is the difference between being able to pay your fuel bill and make you payments to Caterpillar Financial and everything else. I just wanted to.
Is that per truck?
That's for the total business, $154,000 a year on.
How many trucks?
What would you have? You probably have 3-4 trucks on that, maybe 5.
4 trucks.
Yeah. Is that about right? Mm-hmm. That's $154,000 on a total gross of $1.7 million. That is a real number. Chairman Dolezal, did you have something you wanted to add? You wanted to ask or speak, or?
I'm just trying to absorb the conversation a little bit here, but Representative Meeks, I think if respectfully, if somehow the forestry and ag industries are such that business inputs are not paid by the consumer, I would like to know why my grocery prices cost what they are. Why timber prices have risen the way that they've risen. I would actually argue that we've seen enough data over the last 3 years to say that business input costs 100% are passed on to the consumer, and then some. I know a lot of people who are in these industries, and none of them are starving. In fact, they've had some of the best years they've ever had, primarily because the costs have to the consumer have increased so much. So I think that perhaps if you look at it from the minutia, you may myopically think that I'm not seeing a change in my bottom line, but somewhere that's getting passed on to the consumer. So I don't know where that is, but I think that we can all agree that we've seen costs get passed on to the consumer. I want to dive into the MCD thing, though, because Leader Gooch made a comment that last weekend there was one enforcement agent on for the entire state of Georgia. If that is true, and I have no reason to believe that's not true, I think we can all agree that's absolutely ridiculous. So, and to the whip's point, if the locals don't want to do the enforcement, they don't have to do the enforcement. There's nothing in this bill that is making them do enforcement. So if our pushback on enforcement is, well, they don't want to do it, well, nobody's making them do it. But for those people who do recognize that there's a problem, I don't know the 2-lane versus 4-lane thing. I come back to, the way my brain works is I think about the inverse of every argument, right? And so if the 2-lane enforcement's a problem for locals, it's a problem for MCD. If it's only happening on 4-lane roads, then that means that we're running, who knows what's happening on the 2-lane roads. I think the thing that concerns me on the enforcement and fine piece, and whether it's what we heard under testimony from the Forestry Division of don't make us submit our weights when people come into our facilities, or whether it's this of don't let local law enforcement enforce it. It seems to me if I peel back a layer of that, what I'm really hearing is we're running our trucks overweight. And we just don't want anybody to know it. And I can understand the Barney Fife argument if we don't want a bunch of Barney Fifes running around and pulling truckers over and harassing them. I don't think that that's what any of us want. But I think the thing that concerns me, as I've listened to this conversation over the last 90 days, is it kind of seems like what's inferred is, yeah, we want to tell you that we're complying with the law, but don't make us show you that we are. And I think that that's a problem. As it relates to the family farmer and the $1.6 million, and we've got a lot of $1.6 million small businesses in this state. a lot of them. And I think that all of us, my business partner's here today, and he's out here probably wondering what in the world I'm doing down here talking about truckways. But they all have to live by a set of guidelines that does not force everybody else to subsidize their business, hopefully, right? So, and I've said this before, on the degradation of the road thing, of the asset piece, this is my primary concern. Commissioner McMurray testified that it takes a 20-year road down to 12. The Georgia Tech gentleman, I think, said it takes a 20-year road down to 18 years. So there's some discrepancy. But what everybody will tell you is this does increase the rate at which our roads deteriorate. So I'm concerned about us coming here and saying, well, we're just going to do one more thing where we make everybody else pay. And we have a friend might ask me, why are we just doing two industries? Why can't all these trucks run this way? And I don't have a great answer to that question, to be perfectly honest with you. But this is an unfunded mandate to the local governments, whether it's 10% or 40%, whether it's the 18 years or the 12 years. This is an unfunded mandate. And I said this from the well, I said this in committee. We have underfunded infrastructure in the state for far too long. We have had surpluses in this state and have not dropped a dime of them that I can tell into infrastructure. We see our surrounding states that, yes, they allow more weight, but they spend a heck of a lot more money on infrastructure. Billions of dollars more in the state of Florida went into infrastructure this year than what we put in. When I called the commissioner, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, I said, Commissioner, I said, how much is this going to cost you? He said, $500 million a year, not counting the bridges. I said, what are the bridges going to cost? He said, I don't know, $10 billion? I said, okay, let's talk about the $500 million. If we could find you $500 million, how much does your heartburn go away? And he paused and gave it some thought, and he said, it significantly goes away. And what I appreciated about that is he was being open to the reality of recognizing that we want to move freight and people and products through this state. But it seemed like an intellectually honest approach to where my takeaway from that was this is largely a funding issue for the commissioner. And we've done nothing to address the funding. And quite frankly, we don't know if we're going to be able to get a bill passed here that will address the funding. Because I know that some of the things that have been talked about will not pass this chamber, maybe even either side of the chamber. If we try to do what Colorado does, I don't think that gets done, right, on the per package fee. So I think, and I wanted to clarify, I think the 95,000 pounds happened with a permit over the last 3 years. It was not every ag truck. It was not every forestry truck. So I think that's important to note. I don't know what percentage of them got permitted. The last thing I'll tell you guys is I whipped my committee a week and a half before the vote on y'all's bill, and you had about 3 yes votes. So that's when I went to Leader Gooch, and we got together and had conversations on this, and found what I thought was a pacifier of sorts that allows the industry to at least continue to do some things that they want to do, doesn't do everything that they want to do. I fear that if we take some of the things out of here that were sales pitches from me, from the well, I think the number can change, I think, probably faster than any of us realize. So I want to make sure that I'm open to some of these things that we've discussed. I think let's have those conversations, but I also, we've got 5.5 hours to get a bill. So I want to caution us that we find the right things. So if I can we talk about the radius thing? And I'll just step back, because 75 was in our bill. You mentioned 150 whip, but then I think you said most stuff comes in under 100 anyway. So can you just help us understand why 75 doesn't work? If 150's, what's the, help us understand your thinking.
So currently, it is my understanding, you can drive a commercial truck without a CDL license from the farm 150 miles. And so I'm just looking for some parity in the law there. We could probably jump back to 120, or maybe it's it would just, I think it'd just be cleaner if it was 150. But I mean, I'm just throwing that out there, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Meeks, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, for clarification of that, so a producer that owns their own vehicle, their own commercial size vehicle, a semi, that is not for hire, they're hauling their own products, may haul their farm products 150-mile radius from the farm. That coincides with the federal FMAP program that allows you, without a CDL license, full-scale CDL license, you have to have a Class E, I believe it is, but it keeps that consistent across the southeast.
What's current law
150 miles.
for the 5% allowance?
Yes.
Okay. Why? I got one question on the road degradation thing. Why do y'all think the federal law is 80,000? And can we agree that we think those roads are better made than most county roads?
Absolutely.
So, help me bridge the gap there in my mind.
Bridge the gap, why it's 80 and why it's not 80 elsewhere? Or, give me.
If those roads are, yes. Obviously, the feds have an interest in commerce just as much as we do. Their tax rates are higher.
Sure.
So they want to see more commerce because they tax it more than we do. So,
Why are they built better than ours?
no, not why they built better, but if they're built better and they're at 80, how are you guys comfortable as it relates to the road degradation?
Oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So in committee, the conversation we had about degradation of roads is not weight, it's volume. How many times you drive over this thing? So I would say that the construction of those roads are at the spec they are because I-75 hauls more than Highway 82, State Highway 82, or State Highway 1. There's just a lot more people using 75, 95, 10 than there are using these, like I say, ancillary roads, 82, 1, county roads. I think that's probably why they're built to the spec that they are. To the weight portion, there's more trucks, period. Most of the trucks coming out of Savannah are getting on one of those, 95, getting on 75. Anything coming through the state from Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, all of those are the roads they're traveling. So I think it's volume is why they construct roads like they do. But it's clear that they do allow for more than 80,000, but it's just a permit on a permit basis. And so the question that I had was, and didn't come up till afterwards, there was testimony that said 6,000 some trucks got that permit for 100,000. But I don't know if that includes intrastate travel. So if somebody leaves New York City and they're running down 95, do they got to get a permit to drive through on I-75 or I-95? I don't know the answer to that.
It's a sealed container. Those, you're gonna hit my mic. So those containers are coming out of the port. They have a seal on them. They're not allowed to be opened until they get to their final destination. They're indivisible loads. It's not going from one warehouse to the other through Henry County. So we talked about every truck has to stop somewhere. Yes, but some of those trucks stop multiple times throughout the state. These containers coming out of the port have a clip on the back. They're locked. They're not to be reopened again until they get to their final point where they'll be shipped. They'll be taken off of that trailer and then
Bust
be
them up.
busted up and then out to distribution centers or wherever they're going. So those are 100,000 pounds, and there are less than 1% of those on the road at any time. We have that data to show that.
so that's
And so
the
those
point.
interstates are built. I showed a core sample in the chamber. You have about an 18-inch slab of concrete and asphalt, and then another 18 inches of base under it, compared to a county dirt road that has about 2 or 3 inches of asphalt and
Compare them to a state road.
So we can't asphalt in a state route maybe 4 to 5 inches. So we have to invest in our infrastructure. What did we put in our budget today? We just passed a budget tonight in the Senate. We put $0 in there for bonds for bridges. For the last 7 years, we've had House Bill 170 in place. We've added $100 million almost every year. We didn't put one dime in the budget this year, guys, not one dime. And so that shows the community that we're not really serious yet. We have to get serious about it.
So your point about the less than 1% of the 100,000 pounds, the question I was, so that's, I think that is trucks originating out of Savannah
Yeah,
All right.
primarily.
or Brunswick.
Or
Savannah.
Brunswick, wherever. That's correct.
My question is, if you go into the port of New York and you travel into Florida with that sealed container, I don't know if that happens. Do those trucks have to get a permit from Georgia to run down 75, or they get that sealed container
I think
permit?
it falls under the IRP program, which is the International Road Program that allows them to follow that regulation through Georgia, but I don't want to be quoted on that tonight. But
So
that's-
perceivably, possibly.
Assuming that it is, yes.
Possibly, we have more than 6,000 trucks that are running through Georgia.
I think that 1% is based on data that the DOT has accumulated, and I would assume that's statewide, regardless of where that's coming from, Georgia or the Florida ports, or going to South Carolina or wherever.
Well, okay, all right. Well, I'll submit to that. I think that those are loads probably we originate in Georgia, but there could be some
Could be.
loads coming from South Carolina
Could be.
or Florida or whatever. But does that answer your question that I was talking about? I think it's volume. It's based on volume. And I
Let me ask-
recognize the funding
problem is
portion.
the weight on the axle at where the wheel touches the ground. I don't think it's as much the number of trucks in a day as much as it is the direct weight. And I'm not an engineer, but we've had several discussions with the engineers that are experts at the DOT. And so we're asking, how much more can a road take? Is 80,000 pounds too much, too less? Don't know. 100,000, where does it stop? And so we have to rely on the experts to help us with that information. If we ignore the DOT commissioner and his staff, then why do we even have them? And so we have to listen to them, and they're asking for help. They're not saying we're not ever going to do this. I'm for including every industry at some point in increased weights. I'm not saying no tonight to ag and timber. I'm saying let's find a way to increase it for every industry in our state to make our state better economically and better competitive. We need to talk about tort reform too, Mr. Whip. Maybe that won't happen tonight, but that discussion needs to continue. If we're
Let's
gonna
stay
help
on
the-
topic there,
If we're
Darren.
going to help the, if we're going to help the trucking industry, listen to what they're asking for. I have a letter in here. They're asking for that as well. Insurance rates are one of the highest in the country here in Georgia. So I'm fine to focus on these three issues tonight, but the discussion has to continue after session.
I'm fine with also sticking to a funding mechanism. I know that Chairman Hatchett and Speaker Burns have both committed to funding, and I think everybody in this room understands there's a funding mechanism. I don't think anybody has opposed that. I think what we said is that the industry's growing, and every industry, like you said, pointed out, is growing. We need to grow with them, and if that means we need to invest $1 billion more, then we need to invest $1 billion more. And I'm for having a conversation about how we find that $1 billion. But I would like to move a measure here forward, and so the devil's in the details. I'd like to consider these few revisions, if you guys are willing to move on some of these revisions. I don't know how we do this. I think we've had a full-throated debate here. Do we go get an amendment drafted and then see if we can strike language and
I'd like to make a recommendation, Chairman.
Sure.
I'd like for y'all to give us your final ask, and then let the Senate committee go and have a little time to talk and come back. We can set a time to come back. It's 6:45 now. We can come back at 7:30 or whatever time you wish, and we can come back with a proposal. But I'd like to hear what your final ask is, your final and best offer.
Mr. Leader, if I can make a suggestion, I know they've got some very important business to attend to in the House.
Yes.
So I would suggest that
Bill, would that be?
You're a lawyer, don't
I would suggest that we reconvene this meeting after that very important measure,
I'll
and
second that motion.
I'll be well fed and probably a really good mood and ready to have a good, robust conversation.
I'm with you on that.
Mr. Chairman, does that mean that you're going to be even more open-minded after you eat?
He's going to be more robust.
The answer is it depends.
so.
But I know the whip is going to do his job over there, and I will be very grateful for it.
Well, I'm working as hard as I can over there. Do you want us to submit you language?
Just
or
tell
requests?
us, on these three issues, the 150-mile radius
did I
versus
miss anything?
75, local law enforcement, and I guess the fines. I mean, you're, a little while ago, I thought you said you were okay with the robust
Well,
fines.
I'm not clear as how the fine structure works. I like the bridge portion and the overweight portion, but there's an axle. Is there an axle fine in here somewhere?
It is, but it's equated to the dump trucks to where you've got tandem axle dump trucks. And so that weight is the equivalence of the weight of the others. Instead of gross weight, it's done by axle because of the spread of the weight along the surface of the road. So it's not in addition, it's not
not a separate
stacking,
fund.
it's just they have to weigh the dump trucks by the axle and not by the way they would the 18-wheelers.
All right,
So it's a or, not an
when
and.
the load on any tandem axle without a lift axle. So this wouldn't apply to a tractor, a tractor?
I think the motor carrier division would be the experts in the room to answer that question. If we have anyone here, I would love to hear their response to that, or GDOT.
If anyone doesn't. Let me get some clarity on that.
Sure.
What I would say is that if, you know, and this is just my opinion, and I'll defer to the chairman of the committee from whence the bill came, and also obviously the author. My opinion is that we go with this section 1 here, starting on 34, and then you have a bridge proportion here.
Right.
Where's the bridge portion? Is it
It's
2?
It's on the next page.
Is it 258, line 58? Is that the bridge? Portion of bridge vehicle until goes weighted. That's upon a bridge. That's the. So my ask would be the 150 miles. The
Bridges on line 58 through 69.
my ask would be the 150 miles. It would be the doing away with or extending the sunset date. Maybe 3 years, if or 5 years. I'll take whatever you'll give us. This can we go with 1 and 2 versions 1 and 2 here without?
What section are you on, Will?
Excuse me. I'm on section 1,
You're
line
on
34.
line 34.
When
So,
the load on any
so
axle.
that's from going from 88,000 to 93,000 pounds, the fine would be 5 cents per pound. If you weigh in excessively over 93,000 up to 100,000, then the fine gets increased to 10 cents per pound. And then, of course, if you go over 100,000, anything over 100,000 pounds, you would be fined 20 cents per pound. Now, that goes back to the 80,000 pound base.
All right, that's not including any of the variances.
That's right, no variances.
So,
If
so
you're
when
up-
so when our bill, section 1 with the 5 cent, that included the variance, but
That's right.
the others did not.
But I would argue that if you get pulled over in downtown Dahlonega and you're breaking the speed limit, local law enforcement won't write you a ticket for the first 10 miles per hour over. There's a state law that prohibits that. You understand that? But if you go 11 miles per hour over the speed limit, the speeding ticket's going to be for 11 miles per hour over the speed limit. It's not for 1 mile per hour over the variance. So this is written in the same manner. So if you got a truck that weighs 110,000 pounds, do you want them to pay a fine or not?
Yeah.
I think we do.
I do. I just
But
can
we
we
would go
we're
back
not-
to
we're-
can't we just find them under line 40 though, equal to or greater 100,000 pounds?
Yeah.
It'd be 20
Sure.
pounds per excess
It's
weight.
20 cents per pound. That's what this bill does.
Well, I like that. Can we just strike the B and C out of there?
And not having fine at all for
No,
the
the-
first two?
Well, isn't the fine 20 cents per pound for excess weight over allowable weight limitation? So it'd be,
Instead of going back to 80, you would say go back to what? Just for the excess over 100?
No, he's saying to strike lines 42 through 55.
55.
To get rid of the actual portion.
Get rid of the actual portion.
That doesn't give me heartburn unless there's a significant reason why that's in there. That's not language that we
I
particularly
mean,
put
if we
in.
can find them under this, the first section, and then we can find them, and that's with their hauling on the road, and if you can find them under 2, when they're
I think you're thinking that these are stacked fines, and they're not. So this is a different way of the MCCD measuring the weights of the truck.
Okay.
So
Well,
if you pull up on a scale, on a regular scale at a mill, it's going to weigh the entire truck. If you pull up on scales out on the road, they're going to do it by the axle. That's how they compute it. And so I think that's why that language is in there, but we need to verify that before we gut it.
yeah, I would ask, I'm open to the idea, one way or the other. This just seems more simplistic to me, lines 34 through 41.
It's a lot simpler, but you would have to have the total weight of the truck. If you're pulling them over on the side of the road, you're not going to have that capability because they have to weigh each axle weight. And so that's why that language is in the
Okay, I see
parts
what you're saying.
43
All right.
through 55.
And then I want to make sure that this bill, the new bill, it's not repealing the 84,000 pounds for all the other industries that are hauling currently.
That's correct.
All right, and then the sunset would apply to the fines and to the underlying.
The sunset, the way we drafted this bill, only applies to the excess 5% variance. The local enforcement and the extra fines were forever in this bill. Until somebody with more wisdom than us changes it in the future.
Nothing's forever.
Nothing is forever. Well, can we, if we're going to take this thing all together, can we just make sure if we're going to sunset this increase, that we sunset the fines and go back to the regular fining mechanism? I mean, it seems like we're taking on the good and we're sunsetting the good, but we're going to keep the bad with
We're punishing the people that are breaking the law.
Well,
So
We actually catch.
that we actually do catch with that one inspector in the whole state
and to
for a weekend.
Chairman Dolezal's point, I'm all for getting some more MCC folks out there. I mean,
Me too.
Is it possible to eliminate the sunset?
Forever? To take it completely out of the bill? No, he was saying 3 years.
I
Then he
understand
said
what,
maybe 5, now you're saying
I think that would kill your bill
no
to
sunset
sunset.
at all? Yeah. Listen, as I said,
The
I
thing
would
is
be
we-
happy to extend this to every industry if we can get to a point next year to where we have a freight and logistics plan that has some funding in it. Chairman Jasper, you and I have talked about this for many months now. We have to have everybody in the room working with us, saying this is important for these industries. So if we make this permanent just for these two industries and no one else, what is that saying to the rest of the businesses in our state? I think it's wrong to carve it out just for two industries. If we're going to make it permanent, let's make it permanent for everyone, but we can't do that until we solve the funding issue, in my opinion. You agree with that, Chairman Jaspers?
I'm sorry, what number are you, Chairman? Five.
You were in deep thought. You were figuring this out
I'm
for us.
listening, I'm listening.
Yeah, just one thing I looked
good
at
job.
that I've noticed, Chairman, is on line 17. We're talking about attainment area. That attainment area needs to be defined at bill signing. So
It is defined.
Well, I mean, we need to locate it.
It's defined by state law and by EPD based on the non-attainment areas of the state.
Well, that
dealing with
will-
emissions.
Well, that will move over time.
We're under the limits
Yeah.
now, so it's not.
Yeah.
But we're hoping it's.
So you want to make it larger or smaller?
If we're going to do that, if we're going to include the attainment area, let's lock it into what it is today.
There's issues with, as you know, with population bills. They're unconstitutional. So this was the language that we worked with Jenna at Ledge Council that we came up with that we believe is defendable based on the emissions issues and the
Can I
other the
interject?
congestion
Mr.
relief.
Leader, is it not true, though, that the federal government could change the PPPs or whatever else, and it could be the intent of this body to have those 15 counties be, what's what we call, I'll keep wanting to call it a containment area, but anyway.
Non-attainment.
Non-attainment, yes. But a federal regulation could change that from 15 counties to being 40 counties overnight. Well, that's not the intent of this body.
While I suppose that's possible, I think it's so far outside the realm of probability because our emissions are actually lower than the federal standard that caused them to put that in place altogether. So that whatever's been done in advancing automobile emissions has satisfied the Fed's requirements. So there'd be no justification for them to expand it beyond where it is because we're
Mine
technically
is
under
that,
the.
Plus
as
you
they
could-
have
plus you
continually
could come
done,
back
they
and-
can lower it, Senator,
Well,
anytime.
You could also come back in January and repeal that part of the bill. Anytime. This is a one-year extension. We're not talking about 10 years from now. We're talking
I thought
about
we were
12
talking
months.
about 3 or 5.
Well, even if we went to 36 months,
Yeah.
we got work to do. you
Oh,
know.
absolutely, I agree.
Does Representative Meeks, do you have any?
well, I think we just need to put something together and get it to you and see where we go.
Meanwhile, I'm going to do my job and see if we can get some measures moved.
I would recommend.
But
we put
I
back
want
together.
to be on the record as saying that the outcome of the measure that we're going to be working on, I hope it doesn't change the negotiations that's sitting at this table.
I'd like to go back to Chairman Dolezal's recommendation. We meet after this bill of interest passes, we have a little time for supper, we can come back, the three of us will talk, the three of you guys talk, we'll make a counter offer to you, and if we agree, we can go and draft the legislation and get it ready for
And then what
print.
do we have to do after that, Gooch?
We have to put it on the table. It has to be on the desk for 2 hours in the Senate. I'm not sure what your rules are, but in the Senate, it's a 2-hour rule. So we need to get moving on that. Within an hour, we need to start drafting. It doesn't look like there's a lot to change. So I think the structure of the bill can basically stay in place, move some numbers around and some of the things we agree on at our next meeting, and then we can get this done quickly.
So we're going to reconvene, but hopefully we have some language on our side before we reconvene. So let's run a timeline here.
I think we need to be here at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock sounds like a
So, but we have to have it on the
2:33
desks of the Senate 2 hours before.
We have to have it on the floor no later than 10 p.m.
I would be nervous with 8:30. Can we do 8:30?
Sure. 9 o'clock at the latest would be a
Okay. All right, sounds like we got something to work towards.
Sound good to you? We'll see you at 8.
Yep.
All right.
We're gonna get 2:33.